Okay. So let me do this one. Okay, I think you should be able to see my screen. Can you see the screen correctly? Yeah.
Yes, it's fine.
We can see
Okay.
it.
So just a very brief introduction. Thank you everybody for coming to this meeting and to this presentation. The idea of metanoia is very simple, is that money from the bottom to the top has got to stop, and we want to do all the actions and take all the actions that can make this flow of money, power and influence that is going from the bottom to the top stop and reverse. Now, why did we start metanoia? We started metanoia because we realized that the amount of power in the hands of few people is getting out of control, and there is an echo.
If everyone goes on mute, it might help. We should all go on mute.
Yeah, I think we will mute all. Okay. Okay, sorry, I mute everybody. So let's see. Yeah. So what we realized was that the amount of money going from the bottom to the top is increasing, and this is resulting in the end of democracy, in continual wars, and to a continuous decline in living standards. And that's because all the money and the power and the influence is getting into the hands of fewer and fewer people, and obviously they're not acting in our interest. There are some very simple actions we advocate for as a group. So there is a whole list on the website and actions you can take. For example, shopping, we advocate for local and small shopping, not sole shopping. We advocate for community participation. We really want to encourage people to stop listening to the mainstream media and open their horizons and look at independent sources. And this is what Maureen is going to talk to us today. Technologies, we encourage people to use alternatives to big tech, and we got a whole session and video on our website on that. Businesses should be focused locally. Politics, we need to all be active and be part of progressive parties like the Green Party, the left parties, and all these kind of progressive parties. And finance, we really think that ethical banking and using cash are very important. So got a full list of actions, and we got a document. You can download it from the website, and there is a lot of material in the internet on these points. Now, in today's talk, what we want to talk about are geopolitics, media, and genocide. And we wanted to invite someone to this talk who has had a lot of experience, hands-on experience, and understanding of the topic. So I will leave now the word to Maureen Kelsey. And let me, can I unmute? Maureen, can you unmute yourself, because I muted you?
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, I leave the word to you to describe what we're going to talk about today, the importance of it, and why it is important to focus on the right sources. Please.
Let me know when you're done.
Yeah. You can start. You can
Okay.
start.
You want to take that screen off?
Yep.
Okay. So for those who might have missed, I'm talking to you from Palermo, Sicily, Italy. One of 6 countries I've lived in out of my 38 countries of experience. And just briefly, so to give you some context, before I talk about who is America, what's going on with America, what is the economic basis, and what are the geopolitical issues, which I will say that we could spend on each thing an hour. So I'm just doing high level. and then giving you resources for you to spend the time to go and investigate and use your own critical thinking, which we all need to do, by the way. So, my background is born and raised in US. I have 7 years of legals, criminal and civil. Then I went into technology with AT&T, never took it formally, learned everything. And in 7 years, I rose to the top. And I was the personal consultant to the president of AT&T, a business unit that did information technology services for 410 organizations globally. And that was my training to become a vice president. Before that, I had decided, and for a long time, that I was very interested to go international. And I said, well, guys, this is really nice, but how about put me in AT&T International? And they said, no. Well, okay, I had applied to the State Department, and it just so happened that one day they called me and said, we have an offer for you. Are you interested? So I want to say a little bit about it, because some of you have heard numerous people during the Biden administration that came out and made videos about exposing and why they left, resigned, whatever. So my position was an information management and security specialist. Very extensive training, not just in technology, but in area studies, because I was assigned to Moscow, Russia, as a Russia specialist. And there was a lot around that, including language. And also, I did have training at Langley, CIA headquarters. So after that, I spent 8 years in Russia total. During my service as a diplomat, I was deployed to the front of Russia's genocidal war in Chechnya in 1995 on a humanitarian issue at the request to Bill Clinton, who was my boss, by George Soros, for an American humanitarian that disappeared. So I was a non-combatant, high-value target. So I know something about genocide. I will like to mention that my former colleague is Bill Burns, the recently former CIA director, who at the time was chief of political at the embassy in Moscow. And he knew me professionally and personally. So following that, I had my own business, made my own products and services, sold them from Siberia to Silicon Valley and everywhere in between, etc. So I have a lot of work, and then I went into the small medium enterprise sector. But I've always been very interested in geopolitics, in global markets, like for a very, very long time. And in terms of activism, it's said in the writing that my activism is Yemen and Palestine. And Yemen, I was on the Yemen Youth Revolution Council, and I had the honor, at the request of the Yemeni youth, principally in Sana'a, to meet Tawakkol Karman, who won the Nobel Peace Prize, which we did, and she and I protested at the United Nations. My work for the Revolution Council was with the US government. So a lot of senior people, the State Department, etc. Okay, so let's talk about, I'm gone from America for a long time, and I go back and I see what's going on, and I notice that, wow, is America a democracy? No. Is it a republic? No. It's an oligarchy. And I just lived 8 years of oligarchy in Russia. So I think I know something about oligarchy. And one day it really irritated me that Paul Krugman, American economist, wrote an article, and it was so offensive to me. And I wrote him an email and told him, why don't you write about oligarchy American style? And you could look it up, because he did in 2011. And some of his content was from my email to him. So America is not a democracy. Citizens United was implemented. Corporations are people. Who's at the top? Who's running the show? It's the billionaires and the corporatists. So let's make the connection between economics, drives politics. The politicians are just implementing what the masters say. Okay. And they're bought off. I mean, if anyone doesn't know that, I mean, America is, I would say, the most corrupted country in the world, from Washington to Main Street. And I lived in corrupted Russia, but Russia's economy is so much smaller than America's. So I give America the prize on this. And um, the politics, an extension of that, when there's a lack of diplomacy, is war and genocide. And so the current genocide is not the first genocide of this organization, because they've done it before. And I happen to be old enough to remember, at least I don't remember South Korea, but Vietnam, yes, absolutely, and on and on and on. And we need to remember that the President of the United States typically has no option to make all of his own or her own, his own decisions. We haven't had a woman yet, but because there's a deep state. Okay, there's a deep state in America. There's one in the UK. There's one in all these countries, deep states. In America, it's the CIA, and they have 18 intelligence agencies. Why do they need 18? But anyway, everything that Americans say, do, whatever on their computers, America sucks it up and records it. So they totally violate your privacy. They're totally monitored. You can't hide anything. If they want something, they'll get it. That's the reality of the situation. Economically, well, they're like close to 36 trillion in debt. The 80% of Wall Street, the value is owned by the corporatists and the billionaires. And they're very concerned because Trump's tariff wars really are a big bust. And also, there are countries now that don't want to buy U.S. treasuries that support the debt. So America is really desperate economically, extremely desperate and very fragile. And in fact, it was reported by the Federal Reserve that there would be a recession in 2025 and the GDP would drop 2.8%. So let's just talk for a moment about the fact that whatever Trump wants to do, if it's counter to the deep state, he's got a lot of pushback. And currently he's in a box between the deep state and the people that he put in his own administration who do not agree with him. So they're neocons, they're all xenonuts, but there's neocons and they want war with Iran. And then there's the group that doesn't want war with Iran. So, and it's really important to remember that Donald Trump says a lot of things, and most of the time, if you fact checked it, it's hard to find actual real truths or facts in there. And he's a TV reality guy, and he's not a deep thinker, and he likes to go by his gut. And what does he care about? Himself and money. Himself and money for his family too. So let's talk about geopolitical, because the world's on fire now, and the root cause is the fact that America doesn't want to accept that it's in decline. It's a dead empire. You listen to somebody like I did yesterday on Al Jazeera English, El Masri from Doha Institute. We're listening to the world's only superpower. That's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. There are multiple powers. There's Russia, there's China, there's the US. It is not anymore a superpower. And in fact, if you listen to military people, you'll understand that it is technologically inferior to the military of Russia, China, and Iran. Technologically inferior. In fact, the Houthis just kicked them out of the Red Sea. So they lost 3 F-18s. They're worth at least 72 million each, between 72 and 80 million. And they lost 22 drones that the Houthis shot down, 32 million. So in like a month, they spent $1 billion at least on just hardware, not to mention all the operational costs. So it was the Trump administration that initiated a ceasefire. And no, the Houthis did not capitulate, and they're still shooting missiles into Israel. They never stopped. So that's where we stand on that. But let's talk about the GCC meeting, because this is really interesting. So for those who are not aware, Trump walking away with an estimated $4 trillion of investments from Saudi, UAE, and Qatar. And if we think about economics influences politics, why are they spending $4 trillion to invest in America? Which, by the way, they already have a lot of money and investments in America, because they want to buy political influence. That's what they want to do. And they want to convince Trump, they see Trump as a person who they can make deals with, which, you know, Trump is transactional. So he's very happy because his approval ratings in America are in the toilet. And people there are, you know, Americans are all over the place over attacks on the First Amendment, attacks on universities, attacks on migrants, the tariffs, etc. It's just very chaotic there. So he wants to bring home a win. And for Trump, that's money. So he announced today, after meeting with the Emir of Qatar, who made a very important speech after meeting solely with Trump for 2 hours, about what they demand from Trump, and that is to bring peace to the region so they can have economic prosperity. No wars. They want all these conflicts solved. So Trump agreed to that today. So before I go on, I do want to show, Gabriella, can you put up that screen? Because there's a very interesting guy you ought to check out. Can you put up the screen, the chart with the Trump Organization? Yeah, can you make that a little bigger? Okay, so there is a foreign correspondent named John Helmer. He is born in Australia. He studied at Harvard. He's like 79 years old now. He lives in Russia since 1989. Anyway, he did a big study of the Trump Organization. And he posted on his website all the data that he collected to make this diagram. So what's important about this diagram? It is a racketeering organization, a profiteering organization. And this is how Trump is administering his administration. And look at the names we have on the left, Elon Musk, and on the right, Peter Thiel. So everybody knows who Elon Musk is, but Thiel is the owner of Palantir. Palantir, very heavy into big tech, very heavy into surveillance, and that whole, deep state kind of activity. And in the middle is, in the middle where we have like what is executive brand. Anyway, Trump's two sons are in that block. Then you have the investor block. And so basically the way that Trump and how Trump is operating is you got to pay to influence his administration. You need to pay. And that's how they decide what executive orders are going to be issued, what laws they want to pass in Congress, what decisions they want him to make, because Trump has two concerns. One is how to save the billionaire corporatists, how to protect them, and at the same time, how to keep America from economically declining any further. And well, his wish would be for it to rise, but that's a really two conflicting areas, and probably that the reason most economists think that he's doing this, trying to cut out government waste, fraud, and abuse, is to save money so he can give the top 1% another estimated $5 trillion tax break. He wants to wealth transfer to them. And that particular law he passed, he did that in his first term. It has a sunset clause, which expires this year. And so he's got to come up with money in order to justify giving this new big break to these super wealthy people. So Okay, thank you. All right, so out of the GCC meeting that implicates the Middle East and how it's connected to Russia, Ukraine. So the same people who were involved in the genocide in the middle in Gaza of Palestinians and expanded in the Middle East are the same people who decided for decades, over a decade, I mean, this goes back to 2008, George Bush Jr., and it has evolved. And it's always been America's policy. The Cold War with Russia never ended. And they've always wanted to destroy Russia. I mean, this has been their goal, to break it up, to profit off of their resources, because Russia is extremely resource rich. And this is probably the worst ones around this Russia phobia is the UK. And, you know, most people think that Europe is sabotaging Trump, and also the Biden administration's involved. And they don't want to end the war with Russia because they don't want to give up the idea that they can bring down Putin, that they can, you know, take over the Eurasian landmass and profit off of it, because Europe's in really bad economic trouble. We got countries that are close to bankruptcy and they're in recession and they don't have anything. Europe's been described as a boutique or a nice place to visit, but in terms of global trade in the world, it's got to make some very serious decisions, which apparently the globalists controlling it do not want to make. So the connection of this is to the Middle East, that why do they want to regime change Iran? What is the plan? Well, Alistair Crook, who is got very extensive experience, laid out a plan weeks ago, and a lot of analysts said, hey, this makes sense. So what do they want to do? I mean, this is also against BRICS, because BRICS now is a larger global trading group than G7. It makes the G7 almost, you know, look poor now. What do they have to offer? So they are attacking BRICS. They want to isolate Russia, and they want to do a divide between Russia and China, which they will not succeed. But this is how these people think. Okay, they keep like rinse and repeat regime change, create chaos. Let's pit one against the other. Well, that's not going to work this time. But why is Iran so critical? So the plan that Alistair Crook laid out, which makes a lot of sense, is that if they regime change Iran, the hub of BRICS' new trading route, they can disrupt that. And China gets 90% of its oil from Iran. So they can now isolate China and control oil in the Middle East and cut China out. Who's going to supplement for that? Okay. And also, it gives them access into Russia. So yeah, you put that chart up. You can see this is the trading route. And of BRICS, the three top countries are Russia and Iran. And Iran is a very important hub because of its geopolitical location, and also because of China gets so much of its oil from there. And they are very close, closer than ever, these three countries. And there is a new path. It's actually an old path that they've decided to use that actually enters into the junction of this geographical area. But also, Russia doesn't want a U.S. puppet in Iran because it gives access up into Russia. They don't want it. Because why should Russia trust the United States? Why would anyone trust the United States? They don't have a very good history of honoring treaties. And as we've seen, they don't really make ceasefires. They make ceasefires where, you know, you cease and we shoot. We saw that in Lebanon. We saw that also in Gaza. and it's not unusual. So what can be very interesting is to see what Trump really does, because if we take a swing around the region, Lebanon is really problematic, and Syria, they made a disaster out of Syria. I mean, Syria's got like 4 occupiers. It's not even a sovereign country. And, all these people were involved: Turkey, US, Israel, Qatar, Saudi has it. Everybody's got interests. Even Egypt has interests because they're concerned about their border. But in any case, the GCC made a presentation united, fully united. So Trump asked Qatar to help with the Iran deal. We could call it non-proliferation, or to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon, which they don't want to have. They've said they don't want to have it. They're not building one. But, this is all like part of how to not attack Iran, because the Pentagon already reported this is not a war that America's not going to take a lot of suffering, because they certainly will. And they certainly will in Qatar. There's at least 10 US bases in the Middle East, and Iran will hit every one of them, and they will hit oil fields. And also they're concerned about Yemen because, they didn't invade Yemen as they talked about, because there was discussions to invade Yemen. UAE were going to participate, and Saudi with mercenaries. But if you watch Max Blumenthal's interview with the spokesperson for the Houthis, he said, yeah, we know about that. But, like if they send people in, well, they did that before. We defeated them. But also, we can hit their oil fields, which they have done before. So that never happened. And then we had the ceasefire. So a lot of things are shifting. And Hartz came out today and said that the Trump administration, 2 articles, is putting tremendous pressure on Israel. And then the second article Hartz came out with, Trump is on board with the GCC, and the only rejectionist is Netanyahu. So that's where it pretty much stands at this moment. And we can see through actions that the Trump administration is really like putting the screws on Netanyahu. And yesterday, Netanyahu made a presentation in Hebrew, which was translated into English, saying that they needed to, become independent from America and also make their own weapons. I mean, this is a joke. This little hole in the wall can't survive without American money or American military support. So it could be, Trump took $4 trillion. So, if he doesn't want them to cut off the money, I don't think he's going to be, double dealing. And so they're all connected because they want to control and don't want to give up imperialism and colonialism. They don't want to admit it's over. But as we can see it unfolding, well, they are going to have to admit it's unfolding, because this has been known since I took my course in 2012, that in the 20th century, contrary to Joe Biden, who said all the time, America owns the 21st century. No, that was never going to happen, because it was very clear that the power was going to shift to Asia and Africa. That is going to be the 21st century. And as I said before, you cannot fight nature. It's very, very grounded. A lot of it has to do with demographics, especially the aging populations, but also economically. Trump wants to have $1 trillion military budget. Well, I don't know how the hell he's going to fund it, because America's virtually broke. At this point, it's very serious what's going on in the U.S. economy as well as in Europe. So let's see. I think I need to end there, because I really want to leave space for people here, except to mention one thing about media. I gave you a list of people. What I personally do is I listen to people from different sectors, analysts, economists, military people, intel people, people from all diverse backgrounds, because I want to hear what everyone has to say. And everyone has something to contribute. And, it's not like they all agree 100%, but you really get, like, if you listen to them, you can really connect the dots, and you can really see where these people, their knowledge, understanding, and expertise converges to, like, fill the gaps between economic, political, wars, and genocide. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Maureen, for this, I think, great presentation, because it's a very good summary of everything, and I think it's very important for everybody of us to really get the information from the right sources, because it's very easy to get hooked up on CNN, BBC, or whatever mainstream media there is. But in reality, by looking at these sources, we can get so much more in-depth information. So we start with the questions.
There is one in the chat from Sunny.
Yeah, no, there's no real questions. I just thought what you said, Maureen, about the American government, but Trump basically taking money to be able to make decisions politically is a little bit like what you hear a lot about IPAC buying off the American politicians. It's very similar, isn't it? It made a lot of sense. It's a really good point.
Well, the RICO organization is well beyond APAC. This is, oh yeah, I want to mention this too, because days after I saw John Helmer present this diagram, I heard Pepe Escobar, and he had just come from China, and he was in 3 cities. And when he was in Shanghai, he was talking to professors. Academia always shows up at these events. They play an important role in a government's, decisions. At least it certainly does in China, but in a lot of countries. So he was talking. I think it was on Design Works Tanim, and he was telling him, I talked to this professor in Shanghai, and he was talking about Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and the role. And actually, what he was reporting, he heard from this professor in Shanghai, was exactly the diagram that I showed you earlier. Okay, so China's already figured this out. And this is really important because it's like, what are their power centers? With China is very strategic. And on top of that, he also talked about how China matches up. They study a country very carefully. And of course, they would study America very carefully. And by the way, they are the second largest holder of American debt. They have 800 billion of holding of American debt, and Japan has 1 trillion. So they also place a heavy importance on the cultural aspect, which America doesn't do. I mean, it's like our way or the highway. We don't care to know your history. It doesn't matter. This is like, I lived in Russia, and I knew more about Russia than people that live there and were senior in the United States government, because they did not ever embed themselves in the culture to really understand. Anyway, they match it up, and they so that they understand, like, what are they saying and why are they saying this, and how do we talk to these people? But in this last go around, they ripped off the mask. Chinese are very, very polite, but boy, when they did that meeting in Switzerland just the other day, the words that came out of the Chinese mouth were very tough, and rightfully so, because this is economic warfare, and a lot of people, the global markets lost trillions, many trillions, at least 10 trillion. So it's bigger than APAC. The RICO organization is much bigger than APAC. And this is why, if anyone saw Trump's inauguration, who was sitting there in the audience? All the tech bros, billionaires. Zuck was there, and Thiel was there, and the whole lot of them, Musk, all of them. They were there. Bezos, okay? Because they're fundamental to, that's why you see Musk and Thiel in this RICO organization. By the way, racketeering organization is a federal crime in the United States. And this is exactly the model of exactly a criminal racketeering, because it's all collaborative. They all know what they're doing, and it's all to self-enrich themselves, okay, by operating the American government. So I want to differentiate that from AIPAC, which they funnel money into AIPAC to pay politicians. But this RICO organization, we're talking a lot more money.
Hanan, you had a question?
No, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to send an emoji. But anyway, I'd like to ask maybe about Trump himself, because he's a Christian Zionist. Is his behavior towards Israel personal, towards Netanyahu, or there is something in his mind that we have only to guess? What's your opinion, Maureen?
Oh, I'm sorry, what is his name?
Trump. Trump is a Christian Zionist.
Oh, no, he's not. No, that's a good question. Trump is not an ideologue. Okay? Trump is not a Zionist. Trump believes in Trump. He's singular. Okay? He is not a Biden. Biden, absolutely, full-fledged Zionist, proud to be. Okay? Couldn't care less how many Arabs got killed. Nope. And that goes back to Lebanon, etc. But Trump is not that way. And actually, Trump has a very long history. Gabrielle knows this. I told him many, many months ago that Trump is anti-war. He really doesn't like wars. And I'm sure he's like, to walk into the Ukraine deal. I mean, he owns the war. He did participate in this in his first term, but he didn't want to come in because his main goal, Trump's main goal, is to completely revolutionize America. So all these wars are really annoying to him. And yes, he surrounded himself with Zionists. In his administration, they're all Zionists. Even Tulsi Gabbard, to get the job, converted to Zionism. I don't know that she really believes in that, But the point is, he's not a Mike Huckabee by any stretch. He calls himself Israel's best friend. Well, if he was Israel's best friend, he would get rid of these poisonous extremists. He would get rid of them. And by the way, if he pushes the ceasefire through, as he says he's committed to, and it's been really solidly reported, and in front of the GCC, he embraced it, Netanyahu's government is anticipated to fall. So, but the point is, Trump gets a lot of money from these people. All of his supporters are not Zionists, but there is a group that are Zionists who are mostly Christian. And, Mariam Adelson has given him 100 million, maybe more. But Trump is possible that it is possible. This is why, and if you listen to what it was said in Saudi, because I haven't heard anything said in UAE yet, in Saudi and Qatar, their hope is with Trump because Trump is different. Trump will buck the deep state. Other presidents, Obama couldn't stand Netanyahu, but he would never buck the deep state. Trump would, but he's getting pressured. He's getting a lot of pressure from the deep state, from the neocons, from the Zionists. He's getting a lot of pressure, but he did go to the Middle East, and he is doing what he's doing. And I listened to him for over an hour, and it's like, oh God, it's like kind of painful to listen to Trump over an hour because 99% of what he says, 0.9, is a lie. But he's not so committed, and he talks about running for a third term, but then he'd have to be a dictator because it's not legal. And I think he just blows the smoke. He says a lot of crap. But he doesn't have to be reelected. He can do what he wants if he wants to. Of course, a number of analysts have said he could get whacked. He could get assassinated if he goes too hard against the deep state, because the deep state is very strong and it's been there for a very long time. So he's not wedded to that. Trump is transactional. So what is good? So who knows what he'll do? We don't know, but he's not one of these, he's not Mike Huckabee. Mike Huckabee had to come out and say out loud in Israel that America can do what it wants to do. If it wants to bring aid into Gaza, we'll bring it in. You have nothing to do with it. We want to get our person out of Gaza, we'll do it. You have nothing to do with it. Mike Huckabee doesn't even think that Palestinians even exist. That's how crazy of a Zionist ideologue he is. But Trump doesn't go that route. But he puts these people in, I think, to satisfy his donors.
There's a question from Reem in the chats. What do you think would be the way out in the short and medium term, as well as long term?
The way out of what?
Reem, if you'd like to clarify your question, please.
Hi, yes, thank you so much, Maureen. Medium term, way out of the genocide, the whole situation the world is in. It's a big question, but I think we need to be able to think of the future and what might work. So many people are in misery and impacted by what's going on, and it only seems to be getting worse.
Well, I think it's getting worse because Netanyahu is desperate and he's acting out, especially against all the offenses. There's been a lot of things that have happened and he was cut out of the picture. He's not running the show. And if anyone thinks that Netanyahu runs the American government, well, that's not true. It looks like that, but it's not true. So, and I think that's why he's even escalated even worse today. Because even Harrods is publishing that Trump's in on the GCC plan. And the GCC was if you listen, I posted it on LinkedIn, but there's official reports and there's the Emir's statement standing with Trump sitting right next to him. And this was after they had 2-hour discussion. And top of the list is to stop with a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, to bring in aid. And then if you look at what Trump said this morning, he entertains the idea of the starting of talks for an independent Palestinian state. Now, what the GCC says, you're never getting normalization from us unless we get the two-state solution. We're not normalizing. So we can't say, nobody can really say, but we can say that it is true that Trump's really trying to pressure. Of course, if it were me, I would just tell BB, your money's over and no more weapons and we're done with you. And he'd stop. But you could say that about Russia, Ukraine at any time. Trump can say, I'm turning off the money to this criminal organization that runs Ukraine and no more weapons. We're not delivering them anymore. And it would stop. It would be over, right? So why doesn't he do it? I think because he's got a lot of pressures from deep state, from Zeos, from neocons. Everybody's crushing in on him. But he did make an official statement in Qatar before he left today, following what was said last night. And Hartz even recognized it. I posted on LinkedIn the article. Gabriella, I sent you those two, right? Yeah, so the one says the Trump administration is working really hard to bring about a ceasefire, okay? And the second one, Hartz, shortly thereafter, Trump's all in. He's all in with the GCC. It's a GCC U.S. endeavor to stop the wars in the Middle East and to use diplomacy and to work out the troubles. Now, who's making the wars in the Middle East? U.S. and Israel, with the UK's blessing. Okay? So if you listen to what was said by the Saudis, by the Qataris, very eloquent, but they said it exactly the way it is, including to Trump about the illegal, decades-old occupation, which is unacceptable. They did not mince words. They were very clear with him. So you know what? If he wants to, if anybody can't understand that, they have got to stop this because, well, I mean, Israel's burying itself. At some point, it's just not going to exist anymore. It's become so unacceptable, and they will not tolerate this. They made it clear, okay? And to sweeten the deal, they gave him $4 trillion. I mean, you know, and they did really big pomp and circumstance because Trump loves that, you know, all that gold around him and everybody fawning over him. And this is, they know who Trump is. Now, I don't excuse them for not using their leverage because I can tell you they have always had leverage from the very beginning, because I'm old enough to remember when it was used and we had long lines to get gas, and it was odd and even depending on your license on your car, because the Middle East just said, well, we've had enough with you, America. And they, you know, did the oil embargo. I lived through the oil embargo. I mean, they could have done this. They could have caused the price of oil to go way up, but that's not what they chose to do. They chose to think about their own interests. I think everybody knows that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I mean, they've thrown so much money now at the business making trip of Trump that they should have tons of leverage.
Well, I think that they decided, because look, let's face it, they are colonized. They are colonized. They've never had, I mean, they're colonized. They also used the word, which I thought was very important. And when I did a write-up about this GCC conference, they requested, well, demanded actually, balance in the region. So they don't want this game anymore where US, Israel, and Europe. If I say US, it's Europe, because they're like vassal states. They don't want this hegemony deal anymore. They want all issues solved. They want peace. They want prosperity. And I'll tell you what drives them very, very much. The value of oil is not the same as it was 30 years ago. They have got to diversify their economies. They must. UAE wants to be the AI hub. Saudi has the 2030 project. Qatar is very heavy into, well, they are really heavy into education, but they all want to create, to maintain their wealth and positions. They can no longer rely on oil, folks. Oil has run the world for over 100 years, but oil is on its way out. It is not going to continue. So they have to think about it. And they also want to attract a lot of tourism. Okay, I don't know if you saw the rave party videos on LinkedIn that go on in Saudi. It was a bit much for me. But in any case, this is like their plans. This is why they want, they asked Trump for the high-end chips. Okay, because they want to be AI centers. So they want the high-end chips. Give us the high-end chips. They need to monitor. Okay, so if anyone thinks they're so against Iran, Iran is a real power. What could concern these tiny countries? Well, not Saudi's not so tiny, but you know, what could concern them is that Iran militarily is really a powerhouse. Conventional weapons. They got weapons hypersonic. America doesn't even have hypersonic weapons. You can't shoot them down. You can't block them. They got a lot of them. The Houthis have them. America doesn't even have this. They have better drones. They have, okay. So, but UAE, Qatar, and Saudi are deficient in the weapons area. They're nowhere near as advanced, and probably they feel uncomfortable about it. But it was brought up that there should not be an encouragement of an arms race in the Middle East. This was discussed, which I agree. And part of the military agreement with Saudi was a letter of intent. So letter of intent is not a, you know, a complete deal.
Mhm. I think there are a few more questions. Then perhaps we can try and wrap it up in the next 10 minutes. Gordon, have you got a question?
Hello, I do have a question. Thank you. I think it was mentioned a few minutes ago that Trump is this is his second term, possibly his last. Who knows? But he's concerned about his legacy. Would you see that the framework that he's trying to put in the Middle East is part of him trying to set his legacy? And he has mentioned in the past having some sort of his eyesight on getting a Nobel Peace Prize. Do you think that idea of grandeur and getting a Peace Prize, a Nobel Peace Prize, kind
Oh
of
yeah,
guides
he's
what he's
got.
trying to achieve right now?
Oh yeah, he doesn't forget that Obama got one and he did nothing to get it, which is true. And Trump is a person that holds grudges. He never forgets. Yes, and he's you know, he's like a narcissist on steroids. Actually, I call him a megalomaniac. But the point is, he does care about his legacy, and yeah, he would like a Nobel Peace Prize. Uh, a part of Trump's legacy always it's about money. So he wants to make money. It's never enough. And he wants his family to be very wealthy and powerful. And so, you know, I mean, he's 78 years old, right? I mean, we don't know how long he's going to last. And he says this stuff about another term. Technically, he cannot serve another term because you can only be president twice, according to the rules, unless he decides to issue an executive order and the courts don't overrule him. But anyway, yes, of course he would. I would love to bring peace to the Middle East. But you know, like he's got to really come down hard on Israel because they're not acceptable anymore. I mean, the world, 95% of the world does not accept them. Questions why they even exist. So, I mean, this is a real present danger. And, you know, you can listen to Elon Pappy. He says Israel's over. I don't know when, but it's over. It's over. The Zionist experiment is over. So, you know, I mean, why do they have to do? They need to end this. That's what they need to do. I mean, but you would never convince a Biden of this. This is why the Arabs, because Gabrielle, it's true, right? I told you from the very beginning when Trump got in office. Well, he loves the Middle East. He loves the Arabs. He loves to go over and make deals with them. You know, he has personally invested in those three countries. Trump personally, and his sons also. So he's got a lot of interest, you know, and you know, after the Nobel Peace Prize, it's probably money, or maybe it's money then the Nobel Peace Prize.
Mhm. There was also a question from Naima. She was asking, I wasn't sure how much to trust what I've been hearing about the ceasefire and Trump talking to Hamas. How Trump benefits from a ceasefire? Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
So the question is how Trump benefits from a ceasefire besides being able to be happy, and not US president so far has been willing to break away from Israel. So are there any reasons for believing that Trump might be the one to break away?
What does Trump gain from a ceasefire?
Yeah.
Well, how about like 500,000 people don't draw mass mortality on his negative for a Nobel Peace Prize? Or how about the fact that you think he doesn't know that Israel's in trouble? And how about the fact that yesterday the same analysts said what I've been telling Gabrielle for a long time. I mean, you know, when is Trump does America stop the mega billions to Israel? It's the worst ROI America's ever had. Israel has never given anything to the American taxpayer, and they don't exist without America. And by the way, I have been to the entire territory. I didn't mention that. In 1997, I went through checkpoints, north to south, east to west, Gaza not permitted. And I was detained twice and interrogated on my second detention. And I did contact the State Department because I was former at that time. And they did file two protests with the Israeli government about my detainments and interrogation. And of course, Israel wrote back and said, we can do whatever we want. But the point is that, if Israel wants to exist, it cannot exist in its current form. The region, it's what, 7 million people, and look at the region geographically. Amongst all these people who are Arab, and Israel is going to be a hegemon, and Israel is going to rule, and Israel is going to continue to kill and bomb and destroy. I mean, you know what? You're never going to get any normalization. People are sick of this. Okay, so the Arab League wouldn't grow a set and effectuate the price of oil and say to Biden or Trump, fix this immediately, or we're not going to do otherwise. They wouldn't do it, probably because they were afraid of sanctions or being bombed. America has that record. In case America will just kill you. They don't care. They'll just bomb you. Anyway, we can't be sure, but he sat in Qatar this morning and he made a pledge that it's the GCC U.S. front on the Middle East. And the GCC, I don't know if you were here earlier, but they didn't spare any words. They were very clear about what they want and what they will no longer tolerate. And they did use the word, we want a balanced region. Well, balanced region means code for no more U.S. Israel hegemony attempts for our region. That is the root of all the causes since before 1948. And you could throw the Brits in there.
Okay. There is another question from Saad, who is asking, could Trump start a war just so that he remains in power, as presidents cannot be removed during the wartime?
Start a war, what, with Iran? He's trying not to start a war with Iran. We don't know if he's serious about Russia. We don't know if he's serious. There are people who believe he really is serious, like Professor Jeffrey Sachs swears. You could listen to him this week. It was Tuesday, I think he was on Judge Napolitano, where he was saying, no, Trump's decided he's going to do normalization with Russia. Well, we'll see. I'm not convinced, but we'll see. I mean, he could.
And there is also a very interesting question from Thomas. He says that he really likes the sources that you're mentioning, like the Gray Zone, George Galloway, Electronic Intifada. And he is asking, don't you feel that the activist scene in some places is a little bit co-opted? How to help the pro-Palestine activism sound like the Gray Zone. I think what Thomas is referring to is the fact that sometimes, and that's what we were discussing on also for social media, right? That sometimes activists try to be activists, but their sources are not correct. They are not following the real facts, and they've also got alternative agendas.
Okay, well, let me say this. The sources I provided, there are many, many people who appear on these, and some of them appear on a number of these. But there are many people. If I made a list, it would be really long. And I listen to them all. Some that are based in Norway. There's a guy, Sloboda, who's based in Moscow. I listen to John Helmer, who's in Moscow. But I also listen, to Ray McGovern, who's, former CIA, his whole career, etc., turned activist. So it's a combination. It's not all one. That's why I'm encouraging people to widen the scope. And social media is important, but you cannot understand anything that's going on exclusively from social media. It is just too superficial sometimes, or it's even incorrect. And why I'm saying it's good to listen to people from different disciplines, because I like to hear from the military people about military, and I like to hear from the economists about economists, but they overlap. Everything overlaps, but you're getting it from a richer perspective of the people's professions, lived experiences. And you're getting a lot of these people are so well, they know history so well. You know, an insight into a nation's past promotes an understanding of its present life and future. If you don't know history, and, you know, if we're talking about American, they don't know history. They don't even know the history of my life. You know, how can you understand? Because it's really necessary to be open and to listen to people who represent different cultures, different professions, all talking about the same thing. And then you can make up your own mind, but you're making up your own mind much better informed. And not to be an influencer on social media. I really shy away from influencers because they're interested in influencing. And I'm not interested in influencing. I'm interested to share facts, information, to transfer knowledge, experience, and to give you proper sources for you to go out and do the work and make your own decisions. But stop relying on these young guys that's in America.
In terms of the media that you recommended, you're asking people to check them out, to analyze the content, and to make their own judgment.
Yeah, it's called critical thinking. Everybody needs to use critical thinking,
right.
but based on, you know, based on information from people who are not giving it to you because they're running for office, or they're sitting in office, or they have something to gain from it. You know, you want to get as apolitical as possible.
But what do you recommend, like the average Joe who doesn't want to spend hours reading or listening to analysts? What would you recommend? Because that's the majority of us don't want to listen to different analysts and make our own judgment, because one,
yeah, but that's necessary. I understand that because it's work. But it's necessary because people are being influenced by people who aren't really very knowledgeable. And they put stuff out and it maybe isn't really true. Somebody sent me, people send me information all the time. I got one today and I said, what does this represent? It's completely out of context. What is it even talking about? Made a sack of assumptions about a one sentence. I mean, this is like, what are you trying to say? I mean, yes, it is always. And by the way, for years when I worked, I did this work for years. Of course, I can thank the United States government for being a speed reader, because I processed many thousands of classified documents and I was reading everything. So I can tell you, when I left and said America was going to be attacked, imagine what I read. And I read a lot. So you won't hear me sound like Josh Paul because I'm not going there. I already saw too much, heard too much, and etc. For me to think in any kind of la-la land about America is a democracy. It is not a democracy. It isn't. And currently, it's. If I like what John Helmer said, it's the United States is being run by executive order. Well, if you know about the Constitution, that's not according to the Constitution. Okay, so I mean, you know, and how can you have corporations treated as people, and they can put in, all these billionaires, all this money, and they do it in dark money, not just openly, in dark money. Okay, and and they buy politicians. They control what laws get made. Like, if you actually gave a list of laws that Americans would want, you would see a list of about 10. Vast majority agree. Why are they never passed? Because they don't want to pass them. They're not serving the people. And if you think in Europe that you're being served by these, what are they? The coalition of the brain dead. That's what Ray McGovern calls them. They call themselves of the willing. Of the willing of what? They're broke. They have nothing to offer their people. They don't represent their people. And the European Union is not a democratic organization. Who elected van der Leyen? Nobody. People didn't elect van der Leyen. So you want to call this democracy? It's not democracy. Nor is the United States operating as a constitutional republic. That stopped decades ago, folks. I can tell you that right now. And my first major was at Rutgers University Constitutional Law, 1 year. So I can tell you, if you take 1 year of constitutional law, you're really solid on the fundamentals of the U.S. Constitution. And I have seen it shredded going back to before George Bush Jr.
Maureen, we can't see you really well.
Yeah, I know, because it got dark here and I didn't turn the light on.
Okay.
Let me go turn it on. So anyway, I'm sorry, but it is work to be informed.
Yeah, and I think what Safa was mentioning is the fact that if you take a standard week for a standard person, right? This person will wake up in the morning, probably have a shower, have a breakfast, get his kids ready, jump in a car, drive 30, 40 minutes, go into an office, stay there for 8 to 9 hours, sometimes 10, then drive another 30 minutes, go for shopping. So I think the ability to even listen to one of those programs is greatly reduced. So I think what is important is, to ask always the question. When we study international relations, they say always to say, well, why is that information being given to you in that way? So rather than, opening up a mainstream media, we should start to get the habit of looking at alternative medias. And then if by mistake we happen to be on a mainstream media, we should always ask the question, not whether the information is right or wrong, but more, why is that information being presented in that way? Because that then, even if we don't have all the time to analyze, puts the doubt in the head, right?
Well, let me say something about this point, because if you turn on mainstream media, or, even when I watch Al Jazeera English, I mean, what they talk about in Syria is like, it makes me laugh. I mean, they're so far from what reality is because they want to make a different picture. But the point is, like, all these governments have a narrative. They create a narrative. It's a fairy tale. It could be a fairy tale. It's their version of reality, but it is not real. If you listen to Trump for over an hour, almost nothing he said was real. He did make one statement about people in Gaza deserve better. That's all he said in that over an hour statement. And he made some other statement. Other than that, it is an absolute invented reality. And then if you listen to Keir Starmer, you get another one. You listen to Macron. It's called the marketing branch of the government's interest, political interest. Okay? They won't tell you the truth. They will say that Russia invaded, and they won't say they were provoked. And they won't own what they have done to Russia for many years, like a coup and otherwise. And they won't own that they're supporting Nazis in the Ukraine. Okay, who if Zelensky agrees to a ceasefire, he's got to run for the hills to one of the villas paid by the American taxpayers because they'll get killed. Okay, so you got to stop listening to the narratives that is coming over any Western. I won't even read the newspapers. The only time I know about a Washington Post or New York Times article is if I hear it on independent media, because they scrutinize the lies out of it. Okay, because there's always going to be some government narrative coming out. And I tell you the stories. I even left a message the other night saying, man, my head is spinning from all the fairy tales being told. I mean, you go and listen to, you hear what these people say, and you don't know what's going on. Or you think or swear, or maybe you don't understand that your country is desperately in serious economic trouble, like the UK, like France, like Germany, like Italy, like Europe. Very serious economic trouble. Okay, you have nothing. You have no tech center. You don't have anything in Europe. What are they doing? They want to spend $800 billion. And as America calls it, they want to eliminate the welfare state. America calls Europe the welfare state. Okay, well, and just like if you don't start getting yourself connected to rally, you can't even understand what's happening to you because you're constantly being told some story. And then when you find out from people who know, who offer their expertise, of course, I read prolifically also. Then you go like, man, I mean, these people, no wonder people are confused, or no wonder, you know, seriously, if you actually start to watch these shows, you'll be, I'm sure, shocked about what you hear.
Indeed.
In mainstream. So I think it's time for us to go because people are dropping off.
Yeah.
Maybe one last word, Maureen, as for us, like world citizens, what actions would you recommend us do in addition to actually being aware of our media sources?
Well, you know, people need to pressure their governments. They need to, you know, contact them, harass them. I mean, you need to pressure these people and need to vote these people and educate oneself so you don't reelect these idiots because they all got to go. I tell you, they all have to go. It's even Elon Poppy said, we need a new political class globally. Okay, which is true because none of these people are listening to their populations. None of them. That's
Yes.
I think that affects everyone. I mean, it really does, but you can be really fooled. You know, do people sitting in some country, I don't know, like let me pick on the UK. They're sitting in UK. Do they really understand like what's going on to their economy? Do they really know? Do they really
No idea.
have any idea? Probably not. And you're not going to hear about this. You're going to be told whatever the government wants you to hear in the media.
Yes, and that's the reason why selecting the right medias, and I think it's just everything starts from an acceptance that we have to put the work in, like there is no easy way, and that we have to convince and talk and educate
Well, I don't
people
know.
around us.
I see people who spend time. Well, I'm only on LinkedIn, but I see them for many hours on LinkedIn. If you got so much time to spend on LinkedIn, you don't have an hour or 20 minutes, 28 minutes to listen to independent media.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. If you're all over social media constantly, like I know some people are, not a lot of them, then you have time to go offline and inform yourself. That's
Exactly.
how I feel about it. So
Yeah. So it's about really making sure that we help people to retrain themselves so that rather than reading the title and having a knee-jerk reaction and having an adrenaline rush because they've read the title, to spend 20 minutes to either read the report or go a little bit more in depth.
I mean, if you think that, which I do and always have, that people have the power to change things, if people are not aware of what the problems really are, how do you change things? Because your representatives blame everything on migrants. Oh, it's always the migrants. They scapegoat them for the real failures. Okay? And they count on you being ignorant for the reason that you just don't have time. And they're certainly not giving you an alternate, an actual reality. They're giving you the party line. This has been going on for a lot of years. And that's why if we want to understand why we have these problems, we have to educate ourselves to decide to vote for people who are not of these type because they're just not working. It's not working for anybody.
Yeah. We fully agree.
And if you think, and let me say that Trump got elected, right? First time a landslide since Ronald Reagan. And a lot of those people are ignorant. They think Trump works for them. Trump works for the billionaires. That's who Trump works for. When it comes down to who do I protect, the people or the billionaire class, who do you think he's going to choose?
Yeah, it's going to be the billionaires. That's why it's being informed, but also being active, and joining the political parties or be in some way of activism or educate people. And, we are growing as numbers. I mean, this meeting today, we were almost 20 people, right, Safa? And there are many people who wanted to join and couldn't because obviously of time zones and things, but the recording is going to be good for them. And I think we just have to keep going until this, number of people who are aware reaches a critical mass. But we also have to be very careful because we already see how everybody is repositioning themselves, above all in the political sphere, to try and recycle themselves, like a Macron, for example, or whoever will be next head of state in Israel, or whoever is going to do agreements for normalization. They will all try to recycle themselves. And the problem is that only by educating people, we can stop them from that, we are pro-recycling, but no recycling of politicians.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, everybody.
I hope you felt it was worthwhile.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. You got so many messages, Maureen, in the chats. People saying thank you, and it was very insightful. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your message.
Yeah.
Okay,
thank
so just so you know, I really did very much attention to sticking to facts without making it my opinion. All right.
Good. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
So, have a good evening, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.